You are on HOA neighbor court. I stayed calm and let her talk. I am standing in my driveway in Fairbanks, Alaska, at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, watching a tow truck back up toward my car, and Evelyn Jones is screaming at me about guest parking violations I did not commit. She is holding a clipboard in a clear plastic sleeve and jabbing her finger at my windshield like she is conducting an orchestra of chaos. I moved to Fairbanks 3 years ago for a nursing job at a busy clinic, 12-hour shifts rotating nights, and I bought a townhouse in Park Pass Ridge Estates Association because it was affordable and close to work. The HOA seemed normal at first. Quarterly dues, lawn rules, the usual stuff. Then Evelyn took over as pool and amenities chair, and suddenly the entire neighborhood became her personal fiefdom. She controls gate access, parking permits, guest passes, decals, fire lane enforcement, and tow vendor contracts like a bouncer at a nightclub nobody wants to attend. Today, my tire touched the edge of the parking line, and she called it encroachment. Evelyn is yelling, "You are in violation of Addendum 3, subsection B, and I have photographic evidence." I do not negotiate with violations. She slaps a sticker on my windshield with no readable text, just a bold warning shape, and the tow driver climbs back into his cab. I ask her what addendum she is talking about, and she says it is in the parking enforcement update from last month. I tell her I never received a parking enforcement update. She smirks and says ignorance is not a defense. The tow truck beeps as it reverses, and I step in front of it. The driver stops, leans out the window, and asks if I am the owner. I say yes. He shrugs and says he has a work order from the HOA. I ask to see it. He hands me a slip of paper with Evelyn's signature and a timestamp from 20 minutes ago. The note says encroachment and fire lane risk. My car is not in a fire lane, it is in my assigned spot, and one tire is maybe 2 inches over the line because I pulled in fast after a night shift. Evelyn is standing there with her sun hat pulled low, windbreaker zipped all the way up despite the harsh afternoon sun, and she says, "Your paperwork is cute. Mine has a letterhead." I tell the driver to hold on. I pull out my phone and start recording. Evelyn's face goes red, and she steps closer, telling me I cannot record her without consent. I remind her we are in a common area, and Alaska is a one-party consent state. She pivots and says the tow is already authorized, and I have 30 seconds to move, or the fees start accruing. I ask her to show me the addendum she keeps referencing. She says it is available at the management office during business hours. I tell her the management office is 40 minutes away, and I have a shift starting in 2 hours. She shrugs and says that is not her problem. The tow driver looks uncomfortable now. He asks Evelyn if the car is actually in a fire lane. She hesitates, then says it is close enough. He frowns and radios dispatch. I hear crackling on the speaker, and a voice asks for confirmation on the location. The driver describes my spot, and the dispatcher says it does not match the fire lane map they have on file. Evelyn interrupts and says the map is outdated. The driver tells her he needs written confirmation before he can proceed with a non-emergency tow. She explodes, yelling that she has authority as amenities chair and he works for the HOA. He shakes his head and says he works for the tow company, not her. Evelyn pulls out her phone and starts texting furiously. I take the opportunity to walk around my car and inspect it. The tire is barely over the line. There are chalk marks on all 4 tires, thin white lines like someone drew them with a ruler. I recognize this tactic. Evelyn has been marking tires to track how long cars sit. I saw her do it last week to a neighbor's guest, and the guest got towed 2 days later. The chalk marks are her signature detail, her way of creating evidence where none exists. I take photos of the marks, the parking line, the distance to the nearest fire lane, which is 3 rows over. The tow driver is still on the radio. Dispatch is asking him to confirm the violation type. He says he cannot. Evelyn is pacing now, clipboard clutched to her chest, muttering about protocol and liability. I tell her if she wants to tow my car, she needs to show me the rule in writing. She snaps, I do not negotiate with violations. I smile and say, then I guess we are at an impasse. The tow driver climbs out of his truck and walks over, He is a big guy, wearing a reflective vest and work boots, and he looks tired. He tells Evelyn he is not towing the car without a valid fire lane violation or a signed owner complaint. She argues that the HOA board authorized blanket enforcement. He asks her to produce the authorization. She says it is in the minutes from last month's board meeting. He asks if she has a copy. She does not. He sighs, gets back in his truck, and drives away. Evelyn watches him leave, then turns to me and says, "This is not over. You will receive a certified letter demanding fees for the call-out, and if you do not pay within 5 days, we will file a lien." I ask her what fees. She says $200 for the tow dispatch and $50 for the administrative review. I tell her I am not paying a cent until she shows me the rule. She smiles, cold and sharp, and says the appeal window closes today and I better hurry. I go inside, grab my laptop, and log into the HOA portal. There is no parking addendum from last month. The most recent update is from 6 months ago and it says nothing about encroachment or chalk marks. I download every document in the portal and save them to a folder. Then I check my email. There is a message from Evelyn, sent this morning, with the subject line "Final Notice." It says I am in violation of multiple parking rules, my guest privileges are suspended, and I owe $400 in fines and fees. The email includes a deadline, today at 5 p.m. It is now 2:30. I have 2.5 hours to respond, and I am supposed to start my shift at 4. I call the clinic and ask if I can come in 30 minutes late. My supervisor is annoyed but agrees. I grab my blue hoodie, throw on my black bucket hat, and head to the management office. The management office is a small building near the highway, shared by 3 HOAs. The receptionist is a tired-looking woman in her 50s, who barely looks up when I walk in. I ask to speak to someone about Park Pass Ridge Estates Association. She says the account manager is on a call. I tell her it is urgent. She sighs and hands me a clipboard with a form that has no readable text. I fill it out and sit down. 20 minutes pass. The account manager finally appears, a man in a cheap suit with a name tag I cannot read. I explain the situation. Evelyn tried to tow my car, claimed I was in violation of an addendum that does not exist, and sent me a final notice with a 5 p.m. deadline. He listens, types on his computer, and says there is no record of a parking addendum. I ask him why Evelyn is enforcing a rule that does not exist. He says board members sometimes implement policies before they are officially adopted. I tell him that sounds illegal. He says it is not his job to arbitrate disputes. I ask him who authorizes tow vendors. He says the board does. I ask for a copy of the tow contract. He says it is not available to homeowners. I tell him I am going to file a formal complaint. He shrugs and says I can submit it in writing. I leave the office and drive to the hardware store near my neighborhood. I need to pick up supplies for a repair project, and I need to think. My phone buzzes. It is a text from a neighbor, a calm guy named Marcus, who lives 2 doors down. He says, "Did Evelyn try to tow you? She just sent an email to the whole neighborhood saying you are parking illegally and setting a bad example." I text back, "Yes. Do you have a copy of the parking rules?" He replies, "I have the original covenants. They do not mention chalk marks or encroachment." I ask if he can bring them to the next HOA meeting. He says yes. I thank him and head inside the store. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmare stories. I am walking down the aisle when my phone rings. It is Evelyn. I almost do not answer, but I decide to hear her out. She says, "I am giving you one last chance to pay the fees before I escalate this to the board." I ask her what escalation means. She says, "We will file a lien, suspend your amenities access, and report you to the state for parking violations." I tell her the state does not handle HOA parking disputes. She says, "We will see about that." I ask her to send me the rule she is enforcing. She says, "It is in the minutes, and if you cannot find it, that is your problem." I tell her I downloaded every document in the portal and there is no addendum. She pauses, then says, "The minutes were amended after the meeting." I ask her why. She says, "To clarify the intent." I tell her that sounds like fraud. She hangs up. I stand there in the hardware store, staring at my phone. The minutes were amended after the meeting. That is the smoking gun. If Evelyn altered the minutes to justify a rule that did not exist, that is not just unethical, it is grounds for removal. I pull up the HOA portal on my phone and download the minutes from last month. I compare them to the version I saved 2 weeks ago. The parking section is different. The old version says, "Board discussed guest parking procedures." The new version says, "Board approved parking enforcement addendum with immediate effect." Someone rewrote the minutes after the fact. I screenshot both versions and saved them to my phone. I did not play my hand yet, and she thought that meant I had none. I finish shopping and head to my car. When I get there, there is another sticker on my windshield. This one says, "Violation notice. Unauthorized parking. Second offense." I peel it off and take a photo. Then I notice something else. There is a boot clamp on my front driver's side tire. The clamp is bright yellow, heavy duty, and locked tight. There is a tag hanging from it with a phone number. I call the number. A recorded message says the fee to remove the boot is $300 and I need to pay online or at the tow yard. I hang up and call Evelyn. She does not answer. I text her, "You booted my car at a hardware store." She replies, "You are parked in a fire lane." I look around. I am in a regular spot, nowhere near a fire lane. I take photos of the entire area, the boot, the parking lines, the nearest fire lane sign 50 feet away. Then I call the tow company directly. The dispatcher answers, and I explain the situation. She says, "Hold on, let me check the work order." There is typing in the background. She comes back and says, "The order was placed by an HOA representative." I ask if she can verify the location. She reads it back to me. It does not match where I am parked. I tell her my exact location. She says, "That is not a fire lane." I ask her to cancel the boot removal fee. She says she cannot. The fee is automatic once the boot is placed. I ask to speak to a supervisor. She puts me on hold. A man's voice comes on the line. He introduces himself as the tow company supervisor and asks what the problem is. I explain everything. The encroachment accusation, the attempted tow, the boot at the hardware store, the altered minutes, the fake fire lane claim. He listens, then says, "This does not sound right. Let me pull the contract." There is more typing. He comes back and says, "Our contract with Park Pass Ridge Estates Association specifies owner-requested tows only. We do not do enforcement patrols." I ask him how Evelyn is placing work orders. He says, "She has a login as an HOA representative, but she is not supposed to use it for unauthorized enforcement." I ask him to remove the boot. He says he will send a driver, no charge, and he is going to review her account. I thank him and hang up. 10 minutes later, a tow truck pulls up. The driver is the same guy from earlier. He sees me and shakes his head. He says she is out of control. He unlocks the boot, loads it into his truck, and hands me a receipt with no readable text. He says, "My boss is pissed. She is not supposed to be doing this." I ask him if he knows about the chalk marks. He nods and says, "Yeah, she has us mark tires sometimes. It is supposed to be for long-term parking violations, but she uses it for everything." I ask if he has records. He says, "We log every mark. If you need proof, talk to my boss." I drive home, already late for my shift. I text my supervisor and explain that I had an HOA emergency. She is not happy, but she tells me to come in as soon as I can. I change into scrubs, grab my badge, and head to the clinic. The whole drive, I am thinking about what the tow supervisor said. If Evelyn is abusing the vendor contract, that is a liability issue for the HOA. If she is placing unauthorized work orders, that is fraud. If she is altering minutes, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. I need to document everything and present it at the next board meeting. But the meeting is not for another 2 weeks, and Evelyn is trying to run out the clock. She wants me to default on the appeal deadline so she can file a lien. I cannot let that happen. My shift is brutal. 12 hours of back-to-back patients, emergencies, and paperwork. I barely have time to think about the HOA mess. But during my lunch break, I check my email. There is another message from Evelyn. The subject line is lien notice. The body says, "You failed to respond to the final notice by the deadline. A lien will be filed with the county recorder tomorrow morning. You have 24 hours to pay the outstanding balance of $600 or face additional legal fees." I stare at the screen. $600. She added another $200 since this morning. I checked the timestamp on her email. It was sent at 4:59 p.m. 1 minute before the deadline. I checked the timestamp on the supposed final notice from this morning. It was sent at 10:30 a.m. She gave me 6.5 hours to respond, and she sent the lien notice before the deadline even expired. I forward both emails to Marcus and ask him to save them. He replies, "This is insane. Are you going to fight it?" I reply, "Absolutely." I finish my shift at 4 a.m. and drive home in the dark. Fairbanks in winter is a special kind of cold, the kind that makes your car groan and your breath freeze in the air. I park in my assigned spot, carefully centering the car between the lines. I check for chalk marks. There are none. I go inside, collapse on the couch, and sleep for 3 hours. When I wake up, there is a knock on my door. I open it and find a process server holding an envelope. He hands it to me and walks away. I open the envelope. Inside is a notice of lien filing, a demand for payment, and a hearing notice. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the HOA management office. I check the date on the lien filing. It is today. Evelyn filed the lien less than 12 hours after the supposed deadline. I call the county recorder's office and ask if the lien is valid. The clerk says it is on file and I need to resolve it through the HOA or dispute it in court. I ask how long I have to dispute it. She says 30 days. I thank her and hang up. I spend the rest of the morning preparing for the hearing. I print out the emails, the screenshots of the altered minutes, the photos of the chalk marks, the boot incident, the tow company receipts, and the timeline of Evelyn's escalation. I organize everything into a folder and rehearse what I am going to say. The hearing is supposed to be informal, but I know Evelyn will bring her clipboard and her letterhead and try to steamroll me. I need to stay calm and stick to the facts. At 9:30, I drive to the management office. The parking lot is almost empty. I walk inside and the same receptionist from yesterday is at the desk. She tells me to wait in the conference room. I sit down at a long table with cheap chairs and flickering fluorescent lights. Evelyn arrives 5 minutes later, followed by 2 other board members, a man in his 60s with a comb-over and a woman in her 50s with a tight smile. They sit across from me. Evelyn opens her clipboard and says, "We are here to discuss your repeated violations of parking and guest regulations." I interrupt and say, "I am here to dispute a fraudulent lien." She glares at me and says, "That is not how this works." The board president, the man with the comb-over, says, "Let us keep this civil." He asks Evelyn to present her case. She starts reading from her clipboard, listing every alleged violation: encroachment, unauthorized guest parking, failure to display a decal, refusal to comply with enforcement actions. She says I owe $600 in fines and fees, and if I do not pay today, the lien will proceed. I wait until she finishes, then I slide my folder across the table. I say, Everything she just said is based on a rule that does not exist. I have copies of the original minutes and the altered minutes. The parking addendum was never approved by the board. It was added to the minutes after the fact. The board president frowns and opens the folder. He reads the two versions of the minutes. His face changes. He looks at Evelyn and says, "Did you amend these minutes?" She hesitates, then says, "I clarified the intent." He says, "You cannot amend minutes without board approval." She says, "It was a clerical correction." He shakes his head and says, "This is a problem." I pull out the emails and the lien notice timeline. I say, "She sent me a final notice at 10:30 in the morning, gave me a 6.5-hour deadline, sent the lien notice 1 minute before the deadline, and filed the lien the next morning. That is not enforcement, that is harassment." The other board member, the woman with the tight smile, says, "This does not look good." Evelyn stands up and says he is twisting the facts. I say, "I have photos, receipts, and witness statements." The tow company supervisor confirmed she was placing unauthorized work orders. She called for a boot at a hardware store and lied about the location being a fire lane. The board president holds up his hand and says, "We need to table this and review the contract with the tow vendor." Evelyn says, "You are going to take his side?" He says, "I am going to follow the rules." The hearing ends, and the board president tells me the lien is on hold pending further review. I walk out of the hearing feeling cautiously optimistic. The lien is on hold, but Evelyn is not done. Over the next 3 days, she escalates again. She sends an email to the entire neighborhood claiming I damaged common property and must pay immediately or be charged daily. The email does not specify what property I supposedly damaged. I reply all and ask for clarification. She does not respond. Instead, she places orange cones in my parking spot with a sign that has no readable text, just a bold warning shape. I move the cones and park anyway. The next morning, there is a notice taped to my door. It says I violated the guest parking ban by having a visitor overnight. I did not have a visitor. I live alone. I take a photo of the notice and email it to the board president. He replies, "I will look into it." That afternoon, Evelyn shows up at my door with a handheld scanner. She says she is conducting a decal audit. I ask her what that means. She says every car must display a current parking decal, and mine is expired. I tell her I never received a decal. She says I should have picked one up at the office. I ask her when decals became mandatory. She says it was in the parking addendum. I remind her the addendum was fake. She says it was ratified at last night's emergency board meeting. I ask her to show me the minutes. She says they are not posted yet. I close the door. I call Marcus and ask if there was an emergency meeting last night. He says no. I ask him if he is willing to testify to that at the next regular meeting. He says yes. I thank him and start drafting a formal complaint. I include every incident, every email, every photo, every receipt, and every contradictory statement. I cite the HOA covenants, the state statutes on liens and harassment, and the vendor contract terms. I submit the complaint to the board and copy the management company. Then I file a records request for the tow vendor contract, all board meeting minutes from the past year, and all correspondence between Evelyn and the tow company. The management company has 10 business days to respond. I also file a complaint with the tow company, detailing Evelyn's unauthorized work orders and fraudulent location claims. The tow supervisor emails me back the same day. He says, "We are reviewing her account and considering terminating the contract with your HOA. If she continues to abuse the system, we will blacklist her." I screenshot the email and save it. The records request response arrives 8 days later. It is a thick envelope with copies of the tow contract, the meeting minutes, and a stack of emails. I spread everything out on my kitchen table and start reading. The tow contract specifies owner-requested tows only, no enforcement patrols, and no blanket authorization. Every work order must include a signed authorization form with the owner's name, address, and specific violation. Evelyn has been placing work orders without authorization forms. The emails are even more damning. In one exchange, Evelyn asks the tow company to stage photos of cars in fire lanes for a presentation to the board. The tow supervisor replies, "We do not stage photos. That is fraud." Evelyn replies, "I am not asking you to commit fraud. I am asking you to document violations." The supervisor does not reply. I find another email where Evelyn orders chalk marks on 15 cars in a single day and tells the tow company to tow any car that is still marked after 48 hours. The tow company never followed through. I print every email and add them to my folder. This is the trump card. I did not play my hand yet, and she thought that meant I had none. The next HOA board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night. I spend the day organizing my evidence and rehearsing my presentation. Marcus agrees to bring the original covenants and testify about the fake emergency meeting. Another neighbor, a woman named Lisa who had her guest towed last year, agrees to share her story. At 6 p.m., I drive to the community center where the meeting is held. The parking lot is full. I walk inside and find a room packed with homeowners. Evelyn is sitting at the head table with the board president and the other board members. She sees me and her expression hardens. The meeting starts with standard business, budget review, landscaping updates, pool maintenance. Then the board president says, "We have a complaint from a homeowner regarding parking enforcement." I stand up and walk to the front. Evelyn interrupts and says, "This is not the time for personal grievances." The board president says he filed a formal complaint, and we are required to address it. I open my folder and start talking. I walk through the timeline, the encroachment accusation, the altered minutes, the fake fire lane claim, the boot at the hardware store, the unauthorized work orders, the fraudulent lien, the harassment notices, the staged photo request. I show the two versions of the minutes side by side. I read the emails between Evelyn and the tow company. I show the receipts, the photos, the timeline. The room is silent. Evelyn is gripping her clipboard so hard her knuckles are white. When I finish, I say she has been abusing her position to target homeowners with fake rules and predatory enforcement. The tow company is reviewing her account and considering blacklisting the HOA. If we do not act now, we are going to lose our vendor and face legal liability. The board president looks at Evelyn and says, "Do you have a response?" She stands up and says, "He is lying. I have documentation for every violation." I say, "Then show it." She opens her clipboard and starts reading from a list. The board president stops her and says, "I need to see the authorization forms." She does not have them. He asks for the meeting minutes that supposedly ratified the parking addendum. She says they are not finalized. He says, "You cannot enforce a rule that was never approved." She says, "Your paperwork is cute. Mine has a letterhead." The room erupts. Homeowners are shouting questions, demanding answers, calling for a vote. The board president bangs a gavel and says, "We will take a 15-minute recess." During the recess, Marcus pulls me aside and says, "A bunch of us want to petition for her removal." I tell him that is exactly what we need. He says, "If we can get signatures from 10% of the homeowners, we can force a vote tonight." I say, "Let us do it." Marcus, Lisa, and 3 other neighbors start circulating a petition. Within 10 minutes, we have the required signatures. When the meeting reconvenes, Marcus stands up and presents the petition. He says, "We are calling for a vote to remove Evelyn Jones from her position as Pool and Amenities Chair due to abuse of authority and fraudulent enforcement actions." The board president looks at the petition, counts the signatures, and says, "This is a valid petition. We are required to vote." Evelyn stands up and says, "This is a witch hunt." I say, "No, this is accountability." The board president calls for a show of hands. The vote is unanimous. Evelyn is removed from her position. She grabs her clipboard and storms out. The room applauds. The board president asks me to stay after the meeting. He says, we are going to review the entire parking enforcement system and draft new procedures. We are also going to send a formal apology and remove the lien. I ask about the fees. He says, you do not owe anything. We are refunding every homeowner who was charged under the fake addendum. I thank him and walk out. In the parking lot, I see Evelyn sitting in her car. She is staring straight ahead, not moving. I do not say anything. I just get in my car and drive home. The next day, I receive an email from the tow company supervisor. It says, we have terminated our contract with Park Pass Ridge Estates Association effective immediately. Evelyn Jones placed multiple unauthorized work orders, requested staged enforcement photos, and misrepresented locations to justify tows. We are blacklisting her from our service area and recommending the HOA find a new vendor with stricter oversight. I forward the email to the board president. He replies, we are working on it. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. 2 weeks later, there is another board meeting. This time, Evelyn is not there. The board president announces the new parking policy. Clear rules, transparent enforcement, no chalk marks, no predatory fees, no retaliation. He also announces that Evelyn has been issued a written warning for harassment behavior and will not be allowed to serve on any committee for 2 years. The room applauds again. After the meeting, Lisa comes up to me and says, this happened to me too. She was targeting my guests and I was too scared to fight back. Thank you for standing up. I tell her she deserves the credit too. Marcus joins us and says, we should get a beer. I laugh and say, absolutely. The HOA is quieter now. The new parking policy works. The board hired a new tow vendor with strict authorization requirements. I never see Evelyn at community events anymore. She still lives in the neighborhood, but she keeps to herself. Sometimes I see her walking her dog, and she does not make eye contact. I am fine with that. My job at the clinic is still brutal, 12-hour shifts and rotating nights, but at least I do not have to worry about coming home to a tow truck in my driveway. The chalk marks are gone. The harassment notices stopped. The liens were removed. The neighborhood feels normal again. I still have the folder of evidence, just in case. But I do not think I will need it. The HOA learned a hard lesson, and the attorney forced a reversal to reduce liability. Evelyn insisted on a deadline, and the timestamp proved she lied. A neighbor petition forced a vote during the meeting, and she lost. Sometimes the system works, if you push hard enough. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.